Kira Veltar walked through the massive doors of the Galactic Council building. Her blue skin gleamed under the bright lights. She was young for an Altarian diplomat, only 40 years old. Most of her people lived for 300 years. The other diplomats looked at her with curious eyes as she took her seat. The council meeting hall was huge. 847 different alien species sat in rows that went up to the ceiling. Some breathed oxygen like Kira. Others sat in special tanks filled with methane or ammonia. A few floated in the air, their bodies made of energy rather than flesh. Kira opened her datapad and began reading the old laws. As the newest member of the council, she had to learn thousands of rules. Most were boring. Rules about trade routes. Rules about mining rights. Rules about who could visit which planets. Then she found something strange. Article 1, Alpha, she read quietly. Under no circumstances shall any member species initiate hostile action against the Terran Confederation or its colonies. Kira frowned. She had never heard of this rule before. The Terrans were humans. Everyone knew humans were weak. They only controlled 12 small star systems on the edge of the galaxy. Why would there be a special law protecting them? She checked. The date. The law was over 200 years old. It was made before her own species joined the council. In fact, it was older than most of the laws in the database. Strange, she whispered to herself. The council meeting began. Elder Quarvin, an ancient Etherean, floated to the center of the hall. Her body looked like silver mist that sparkled with tiny lights. She was over 800 years old and had been part of the council longer than anyone else. Today we discuss the expansion requests from the Zeridian Empire, Elder Quarvin announced. Her voice echoed through the hall without using sound. Instead, she spoke directly into their minds. Commander Brix Hawkins stood up. He was a Zeridian, tall and covered in thick gray scales. Red eyes glowed in his reptilian face. The Zeridians controlled over 1,000 star systems. They were one of the most powerful military forces in the galaxy. My empire requests permission to expand into the Outer Rim territories, Commander Hawkins said. His voice was deep and rough. These areas are mostly empty space. Only a few primitive species live there. Kira looked at her star map. The area Commander Hawkins wanted included space near human territory. She remembered the strange law she had found. Wait, Kira said, standing up. I found something in the old records. There is a law about the humans. The hall became quiet. Then many aliens began to laugh. The sound was terrible. Some species laughed with clicking sounds. Others made weird musical noises. A few just vibrated their bodies. The humans? Commander Hokan laughed loudest of all. Those weak mammals? They can barely travel between their own planets. What law could possibly protect them? Kira felt her face turn purple with embarrassment. But she read the law anyway. Article 1 Alpha says no member species can attack the Terran Confederation or its colonies. More laughter filled the hall. Even some of the peaceful plant-based species seemed amused. That law is older than dirt, said Ambassador Vex, a spider-like creature with 12 eyes. It was probably made as a joke. Or maybe the humans wrote it themselves, added Representative Zahn. She was from a gas giant and looked like a floating jellyfish. They probably wanted to feel important. Commander Hawkins' red eyes glowed brighter. We who command 1,000 worlds should fear these primitive mammals. Our smallest warship could destroy their entire fleet. The laughter grew louder. Even Kira began to think she had made a mistake. The humans did seem very weak compared to the great powers of the galaxy. Their technology was old. Their ships were slow. They had no real military to speak of. But Elder Quarvin did not laugh. The ancient Etherean floated closer to Kira. Her silver mist body swirled with dark colors. Young diplomat, that law exists for a very good reason. What reason, Commander? Hawkins demanded. What could those weak humans possibly do to us? Elder Quarvin's lights dimmed. I am old enough to remember the time before that law was made. I was there when it was written. The council members who voted for it had seen something terrible. Something that made them very afraid. Afraid of humans? Commander Hawken laughed again. Impossible. You do not understand, Elder Quarvin said. Her mental voice became sad and worried. Humans are not what they appear to be. They have been quiet for 200 years. They have been peaceful. But that does not mean they have been weak. Then what does it mean? Kira asked. Elder Quarvin looked around the hall. Her ancient eyes seemed to see things others could not. It means they have been waiting. Waiting for what? Waiting for someone to be foolish enough to break the law. Commander Hakan stood taller. His scales rattled with anger. I refuse to believe that humans are dangerous. They are soft creatures who grow food and write poetry. My empire has fought the Krillian swarms. We have defeated the Iron Legions of Vega. We have conquered worlds that other species fear to visit. And you want me to be afraid of farmers and poets? Yes, Elder Quarvin said simply. Because farmers know how to reap what they have sown, and poets know how to write endings. The hall fell silent. Even the translators stopped humming. For a moment, everyone felt something cold touch their minds. It was like a shadow passing over the sun. Then Commander Hawken broke the silence with another laugh. Foolish old ghost, your mind has become weak with age. The Zeridian Empire fears nothing, especially not humans. He turned to face the other council members. I call for a vote to remove this ancient law. It serves no purpose. It protects a species that needs no protection. And it prevents us from expanding into empty space. Seconded, called out Ambassador Vex. Agreed, said Representative Zan. One by one, the council members voted. Most agreed to remove the law. Only a few old species voted to keep it. They remembered the old stories, but the young species outnumbered them. Kira voted to remove the law too. She felt embarrassed for bringing it up. The humans did seem harmless enough. Elder Quarvin did not vote. She just floated in the center of the hall, her lights growing dimmer and dimmer. The motion passes, she announced finally. Article 1, Alpha, is hereby removed from galactic law. The protection of the Terran Confederation is ended. As the council members filed out of the hall, talking excitedly about new expansion plans, Elder Quarvin remained floating alone. Her silver mist body was almost invisible now. Fools, she whispered to the empty hall. They have no idea what they have just done. Far away, in a small monitoring station hidden in an asteroid belt, a human technician named Kyung-Soo Ro watched the council broadcast. He had been listening to their meetings for 20 years. His job was to watch for threats to human space. He pressed a button on his console. A message was sent instantly to every human world. The message was short and simple. The old treaty is broken. Recommend we prepare for the harvest. Kyung-Soo leaned back in his chair and smiled. It was not a nice smile. After 200 years of peace, things were about to become very interesting. Dr. Hana Seok stood on the observation deck of the colony's main building. She watched the morning sun rise over the wheat fields of Kepler 442b. The golden grain swayed in the gentle breeze. Children ran between the rows, playing games and laughing. This was her home. She had lived here for 15 years, ever since the colony was founded. 50,000 humans called this planet home. They grew food, raised families, and lived quiet lives far from the busy core worlds of the galaxy. Hana was the colony's administrator. She was also a scientist who studied alien plants and animals. The work was peaceful and rewarding. She had never expected to face anything more dangerous than a crop disease or a broken water recycler. That changed when the warning lights began flashing. Dr. Seok, please come to the command center immediately, called Taemin Park over the communication system. He was the colony's defense coordinator. Hana had never heard him sound worried before. She ran through the corridors to the command center. Taemin was standing in front of a large screen that showed the space around their planet. Red dots were moving toward them. What am I looking at? Hana asked. Zeridian warships, Taemin said. His face was pale. 47 of them. They will reach our planet in 6 hours. Hana felt her heart stop. The Zeridians were known throughout the galaxy as fierce warriors. Their ships were powerful and their soldiers were ruthless. What could they possibly want with a farming colony? Have they sent any messages? She asked. Nothing. They are not responding to our signals. Hana looked at the screen again. The red dots were getting closer. How many ships do we have? 3 orbital defense platforms and 12 patrol craft, Taemin said quietly. They are meant to stop pirates and asteroid strikes, not a Zeridian battle fleet. The colony had been built in a peaceful time. No one expected a major power to attack a farming world. The defenses were basic. The patrol craft were small and lightly armed. They would last minutes against Zeridian warships. I need to send a message to Earth, Hana said. Already done, but Earth is 12 light years away. Even with quantum communication, it will take time for help to arrive. Hana nodded. Time they did not have. She spent the next hour trying to contact the Zeridian fleet. She sent messages in every language she knew. She offered trade agreements, mining rights, even complete surrender. The Zeridians did not answer. As the enemy ships got closer, people began to panic. Parents gathered their children. Farmers abandoned their fields. The spaceport filled with people trying to escape, but there were not enough ships for everyone. 8-year-old Jaewon Kim was not thinking about escape. He was in the colony's greenhouse with his grandmother, taking care of the tomato plants. His job was to check each plant for insects and disease. He took the work very seriously. Grandmother, why are all the adults acting strange today? He asked. His grandmother, an old woman named Sunja Kim, tried to smile. They are just worried about some visitors who are coming. Are the visitors mean? Sunja looked out the greenhouse window. She could see people running in the streets. I hope not, little one, I hope not. The Zeridian fleet arrived exactly on schedule. 47 massive warships dropped out of faster-than-light travel at the edge of the solar system. Each ship was over a mile long and covered with weapons. General Voss Hektron stood on the bridge of his flagship. He was a veteran warrior who had conquered dozens of worlds for the Zeridian Empire. This mission was supposed to be easy. Destroy the human colony, claim the planet, and send a message to the galaxy that the Zeridian Empire was expanding. Are the humans trying to surrender yet? He asked his communications officer. They keep sending messages, General, but you ordered us not to respond. Good. I want them to know that their words mean nothing. Begin the attack. The first wave of missiles struck the orbital defense platforms. The human defenders had time to fire only a few shots before their stations were destroyed. The patrol craft tried to fight back, but they were overwhelmed in minutes. On the planet's surface, Hana watched the battle through the command center's telescopes. The human ships exploded one by one like dying stars against the black of space. It's over, Taemin said. Our defenses are gone. Send the surrender signal, Hana ordered. I've been sending it for the last hour. They are not listening. The Zeridian ships moved into orbit around the planet. General Hektron looked down at the world below. He could see cities, farms, and spaceports. It looked peaceful and prosperous. Soon it would belong to his empire. Begin bombardment of the surface, he ordered. General, they are trying to surrender, his weapons officer said. I know. Fire anyway. The first energy beams struck the colony's spaceport. The building vanished in a flash of light and heat. Then the schools were hit. Then the hospitals. Then the homes where families were hiding. Jaewon was still in the greenhouse when the attack reached their section of the colony. He looked up, through the glass roof, and saw bright lights falling from the sky like angry stars. Grandmother, what are those lights? Sunja pulled him close. Don't be afraid, little one. Whatever happens, I love you. The energy beam hit the greenhouse directly. The building and everything in it turned to dust in an instant. Jaewon and his grandmother were gone before they could even scream. Across the colony, the same scene played out thousands of times. Families died together. Children called for parents who could not answer. In 20 minutes, 50,000 people were reduced to ash and memory. Dr. Hana Seok was in the command center when the final beam struck. She had just finished recording a message for Earth. Her last words were transmitted to every human world through the quantum communication network. This is Dr. Hanna Sayok, administrator of Kepler 442b colony. The Zeridians have destroyed our world without provocation. They refused our surrender. They killed our children. Tell Earth. Tell them that we tried to live in peace. Tell them that the galaxy has forgotten what humans can do when they are angry. Tell them they have awakened something that should have stayed sleeping. The command center disappeared in a flash of light. General Hectron watched the bombardment from his ship. In 30 minutes, every human settlement on the planet was gone. The cities were craters. The farms were burning wastelands. Nothing moved on the surface except the wind. Excellent work, he told his crew. Another world belongs to the Zeridian Empire. He did not know that every word spoken on his ship was being recorded by tiny human devices hidden throughout his fleet. The devices had been placed there years ago by human spies. They were so small that even the best Zeridian scanners could not find them. He also did not know that Dr. Sayok's final message had reached every human world instantly. The quantum communication network carried her words to Earth, to the colonies, to the hidden military bases that most of the galaxy did not know existed. On Earth, President Dong-Ho Yoon read the message in his office. He was a quiet man who rarely showed emotion. But as he read about the death of Jae-won Kim and the other children, tears began to fall down his face. He pressed a button on his desk. Throughout human space, red lights began flashing in secret facilities. Admirals received coded messages. Soldiers who had been waiting for decades finally got their orders. The message was simple. Article 1 Alpha has been broken. Begin Operation Harvest. President Yoon walked to his window and looked up at the stars. Somewhere out there, the Zeridians were celebrating their easy victory. They thought they had conquered a farming world and killed some peaceful humans. They had no idea what was coming for them. For 200 years, humanity had followed the ancient treaty. They had kept their weapons hidden and their fleets small. They had pretended to be weak farmers and poets, just as the galaxy wanted to believe. But they had also been preparing. Now the harvest would begin. The galaxy expected humans to respond like any normal species. They expected angry messages to the Galactic Council. They expected economic sanctions and trade disputes. They expected humans to beg for help from the larger powers. They expected President Dong-Ho Yoon to act like a weak leader of a weak species. Instead, President Yoon did something that no one had seen before. He spoke directly to every inhabited world in the galaxy. His message was broadcast on every communication channel. It reached every species, from the mighty Zeridians to the smallest colony worlds. Admiral Yi So-ra stood beside the president as he made his speech. She was old for a human, nearly 90 years old, but her eyes were sharp and her back was straight. She had spent her entire life preparing for this day. People of the galaxy, President Yoon began. His voice was calm, but cold. For 200 years, humanity has honored the peace. We have kept our weapons locked away. We have hidden our true strength. We have let you believe that we are weak farmers and poets. On the Zeridian homeworld, General Voss Hectron watched the broadcast with amusement. The human president looked old and tired. His uniform was simple and plain. Behind him stood an elderly woman who looked like someone's grandmother. Look at them. General Hectron laughed. They think they can frighten us with words. But War Marshal Thek Dranen, the supreme commander of all Zeridian forces, was not laughing. Something about the human president's eyes made him uncomfortable. They were the eyes of someone who had seen terrible things and was not afraid to see them again. President Yoon continued his speech. The Zeridian Empire has broken the oldest law in the galaxy. They have killed our children. They have destroyed our peaceful colony. They have forgotten why that law existed. He paused and looked directly into the camera. Today, you will remember. The broadcast ended. For a moment, there was silence across the galaxy. Then the Zeridian leaders began to laugh. Other species joined in. The humans had made threats, but they had no way to carry them out. That was when Admiral Yi So-ra began to reveal the truth. Hidden shipyards throughout human space suddenly became visible. They had been there for decades, hidden by technology that made them invisible to alien scanners. The shipyards were massive, each one larger than a small moon. From these shipyards came ships unlike anything the galaxy had ever seen. Captain Mingyu Lee commanded the first ship to appear. It was called the Retribution, and it was beautiful and terrible at the same time. The ship was 2 miles long and covered in armor that seemed to bend light around it. When it moved, it did not use normal engines. Instead, it seemed to step through space itself, appearing and disappearing like a ghost. How is that possible? War Marshal Drannen demanded as he watched the Retribution appear in Zeridian space. No species has that technology. His science officers had no answer. The human ship was using principles that Zeridian science said were impossible. But Admiral Yi Sora was just getting started. More ships appeared. Not just a few, but hundreds, then thousands. Each one was different, using technology that seemed to come from a dozen different alien species, but all of them were clearly human in design. Where did they get those ships? General Hectron asked. Our intelligence reports said humans had 12 patrol craft per system. Our intelligence was wrong, War Marshal Drannen said quietly. On Earth, Admiral Yi Sora smiled as she watched the Zeridian reaction. For 200 years, human spies had been everywhere. They had studied every alien technology. They had learned from every species they encountered. They had taken the best ideas and made them better. While the galaxy thought humans were primitive farmers, human scientists had been building weapons that could crack planets. While aliens laughed at human technology, human engineers had been perfecting faster-than-light drives that made Zeridian ships look like they were standing still. The Retribution reached the first Zeridian patrol fleet. Captain Lee had been waiting his entire career for this moment. His ship carried weapons that had been tested in secret for decades, but never used in real combat. This is for Jae-won Kim, he said quietly. The Retribution fired once. The beam that came from its main weapon was not like normal energy weapons. It passed through the Zeridian ship's shields as if they were not there. It melted their armor like butter. In 3 seconds, 12 Zeridian warships became expanding clouds of gas. Impossible, General Hectron whispered. But the human attack was just beginning. More human ships appeared throughout Zeridian space. They did not attack like normal fleets. Instead, they seemed to know exactly where every Zeridian ship and base was located. They struck with surgical precision, destroying military targets while avoiding civilian areas. The humans had been watching. They had been learning. They knew the location of every Zeridian military installation in the galaxy. War Marshal Drannen tried to organize a defense. He sent orders to his fleets to gather and fight back. But his messages never reached their targets. Human ships appeared wherever Zeridian forces tried to gather. The battles were not battles at all. They were executions. In one day, the Zeridian Empire lost half of its military force. How are they doing this? War Marshal Drannen demanded of his advisors. His chief scientist, a nervous creature named Dr. Vec Morlan, had been studying the human attacks. Sir, I believe the humans have been preparing for this war for centuries. Every time we made first contact with a new species, human spies were watching. They learned our weaknesses. They studied our technology. They planned for the day when someone would be foolish enough to attack them. But they seemed so weak. That was the point, sir. They wanted us to think they were weak. While we were laughing at them, they were building weapons that could destroy us. On Earth, President Yoon received reports from the battle zones. The human fleets were performing exactly as planned. Zeridian resistance was crumbling faster than anyone had expected. Should we slow down the attack? Admiral Yi Sora asked. We are winning so quickly that other species might become afraid of us. President Yoon thought about Jae-won Kim and his grandmother. He thought about Dr. Hana Seok and the 50,000 humans who had died for no reason except Zeridian pride. No, he said. Let them be afraid. Fear will keep them from making the same mistake. The human fleet Sol's Fury appeared in orbit around the Zeridian homeworld. Its captain, Do Hyun Bayek, opened a communication channel to the planet below. "This is Captain Bayek of the Terran Confederation Navy. You have 1 hour to surrender, all military forces. If you refuse, we will demonstrate why the ancient law existed." War Marshal Drannon looked up at the human ship through his office window. It hung in the sky like a dark star, waiting patiently for his answer. For the first time in his life, the greatest military commander in Zeridian history felt afraid. He had always believed that strength came from conquest, that power came from controlling others. But as he watched more human ships appear around his homeworld, he realized he had been wrong. True strength came from restraint. The humans had been strong enough to hide their power for 200 years. They had been disciplined enough to appear weak when they could have conquered the galaxy. And now that restraint was over. "Send the surrender signal," he ordered his communications officer. "Sir? Send it now, before they decide to stop being merciful." The human response was not just about military power. It was about something much worse for the Zeridians. It was about making them understand what they had done. Hyunwoo Nam worked in a small office on Earth that had no name and did not officially exist. His job was psychological warfare. For 20 years he had studied the minds of alien species. He knew how they thought, what they feared, and how to break their will to fight. When the war began, Hyunwoo started his own attack. But his weapons were not ships or bombs. His weapons were images and sounds and memories. Within hours of the first battles, every communication system in Zeridian space began showing the final moments of Kepler 442b. Hyunwoo had taken Dr. Hana, Seok's last message, and combined it with recordings from the greenhouse where Jaewon Kim died. Zeridian civilians saw human children calling for their parents as energy beams fell from the sky. They saw families holding each other as their homes turned to ash. They saw the exact moment when an 8-year-old boy looked up at the attacking ships and asked his grandmother why the visitors were being mean. The images played on every screen in the Zeridian Empire. They could not be turned off or blocked. Hyunwoo had made sure of that. The effect was immediate and devastating. Zeridian soldiers began refusing orders. Zeridian civilians demanded to know why their empire had attacked innocent farmers. Zeridian mothers looked at their own children and imagined them in a greenhouse calling for help that would never come. "Turn it off," General Hectron screamed at his communications officers. "Stop broadcasting those images." "We cannot, sir," his chief technician replied. "The humans have taken control of our entire network. Every time we shut down one broadcast, 10 more appear." On Zerius Prime, the Zeridian homeworld, crowds gathered in the streets. They were not celebrating their empire's expansion. They were mourning the death of human children they had never met. "We are monsters," cried a Zeridian female named Kex Moran. She held her own young son close to her chest. "We killed babies. We killed children who were just playing in gardens." The emperor of the Zeridians, Zek Morvan, tried to calm his people. He made speeches about the glory of empire and the necessity of expansion, but his words could not compete with the images of dying human children that played on every screen. Meanwhile, the human fleets continued their surgical attacks, but they were being careful in a way that frightened other galactic powers more than pure destruction would have. Captain Mingyu Lee brought the retribution to a Zeridian military base on the planet Vextar. The base was protected by the strongest shields in the Zeridian fleet. It was surrounded by a city of 2 million civilians. "Target the base only," Captain Lee ordered his weapons officer. "Sir, our weapons will penetrate their shields and destroy the base. But the explosion might damage the city." Then we used the surgical beam. The surgical beam was a human invention that other species thought was impossible. It could pass through solid matter without affecting it until it reached its target. The beam cut through the planet's surface, through the civilian city, through the base's shields, and destroyed only the military installation. The civilians in the city felt nothing. Their buildings were untouched, but the military base simply vanished, leaving behind a perfectly round hole in the ground. "How did they do that?" War Marshal Drannon asked his scientists. "We do not know, sir. According to our understanding of physics, it should be impossible." But impossible was becoming a common word when describing human technology. Elder Quarvan sat in her chambers on Nexus Prime, watching the war unfold. She had tried to warn the Council about the ancient law. Now she was watching the consequences of their ignorance. Kira Veltar came to visit her. The young Altarian diplomat looked sick with worry. Elder Quarvan, Kira said, the humans are winning too easily. Our best intelligence says the Zeridian Empire should be able to fight for months. Instead, they are being destroyed in days. The humans have been preparing for this war longer than your species has existed, Elder Quarvan replied. They studied every alien technology. They learned from every species they met. While we thought they were primitive farmers, they were becoming the most advanced military force in the galaxy. But why did they hide their strength? Because they learned something that most species never understand. True power comes from restraint. The humans could have conquered the galaxy 200 years ago. Instead, they chose to remain peaceful. They only asked that others leave them alone. Kira looked out the window at the stars. And now someone has broken that peace. Yes, and now everyone will learn why the ancient law existed. On Earth, Da-Un Choi prepared for her mission. She was a human diplomat, but not the kind who negotiated trade agreements. She was the kind who delivered ultimatums to fallen empires. Da-Un had a dark past. As a young woman, she had fought in the border wars against alien pirates. She had seen what humans could do when they were truly angry. Now she would represent her species at the Emergency Galactic Council session. Remember, President Yoon told her before she left, we are not trying to conquer the galaxy. We are trying to teach it a lesson. And if they do not learn, President Yoon looked at the reports from the battle zones. Human fleets were systematically dismantling Zeridian military power across dozens of star systems. The war would be over in weeks, not months. Then we will teach them again until they do. Da-Un arrived at Nexus Prime as the Emergency Council session began. The Great Hall was filled with frightened alien diplomats. They had all watched the destruction of the Zeridian Empire. They all understood that humans were not what they had seemed. The Council recognizes the representative from Earth, Elder Quarvan announced. Da-Un walked to the center of the hall. She was a small woman, barely 5 feet tall, but every alien in the room was afraid of her. Honorable Council members, she began, my species did not want this war. For 200 years we have lived in peace. We have traded fairly. We have helped other species solve their problems. We have asked for only one thing in return. She paused and looked around the hall. We asked to be left alone. Commander Brix Hawken, the Zeridian who had laughed at the ancient law, sat in his seat with his head in his hands. His empire was dying. His fleets were destroyed. His people were calling him a monster for what his military had done to human children. The Zeridian Empire broke the peace, Da-Un continued. They attacked our civilians. They killed our children. They ignored our surrender. They have learned what happens when humans are forced to defend themselves. An alien diplomat from the Vegan Confederacy raised a tentacle. What do you want from us? Da-Un smiled. It was not a friendly smile. We want you to remember. We want you to understand that humans are not farmers and poets because we have to be. We are farmers and poets because we choose to be. When that choice is taken away from us, we become something else. What do you become? Asked Ambassador Vex, the spider-like creature who had laughed at human weakness. We become what we learned to be during the wars that created the ancient law. We become the species that defeated coalitions of dozens of worlds. We become the teachers who learned warfare from every species in the galaxy, then perfected it. The hall was silent. You taught us to be soldiers, Da-Un said quietly. Then you forgot that students often surpass their teachers. Emperor Zek Morvan of the Zeridian Empire sent a desperate message to the Council. He begged other species to intervene. He offered to share Zeridian technology with anyone who would help defend his empire. No one answered. Everyone remembered the ancient law now. 6 months after the war began, it was over. The great Zeridian Empire, which had once controlled 1,000 star systems, now existed on only 3 worlds. Their massive fleets were gone. Their military bases were empty craters. Their emperor was dead by his own hand, unable to face the shame of what his empire had done. But the humans had not acted like conquerors. Chancellor Jin-A Quan stood in the rebuilt colony on Kepler 442b. Where once there had been ash and craters, new buildings now reached toward the sky. The wheat fields were green again. Children played in gardens that had been replanted with care. She was the new human representative to the Galactic Council. Her job was not to threaten or intimidate. Her job was to help build something better from the ashes of the old system. The memorial is beautiful, said Kira Veltar. The young Altarian diplomat had become one of humanity's strongest allies during the war. She had worked tirelessly to help human refugees and to document Zeridian war crimes. Jin-A looked at the memorial that stood in the center of the colony. It was a simple stone with 50,000 names carved into its surface. At the top were the names of Jae-won Kim and his grandmother, Soon-ja Kim. Below them were the names of Dr. Hana Seok and all the others who had died. They died because someone forgot the value of peace, Jin-A said. We rebuilt this place so no one will forget again. The Galactic Council had changed dramatically since the war. The ancient law protecting humans had been replaced with something much stronger. Any species that harmed civilian populations of any race would face what the new law called remedial education by human forces. The phrase fooled no one. Everyone knew what it meant. But the humans had proven that they were not interested in conquest. After defeating the Zeridians, they had helped rebuild what they had destroyed. Zeridian civilians were given food, medicine, and shelter. Zeridian children were taught in schools run by human teachers. Most surprisingly, the humans were helping the Zeridians learn to be better than they had been. Commander Brix Haken walked through the refugee camp on Zerius Minor. He had once been a proud Zeridian general. Now he was a man without rank or title, helping to distribute food to his own people. The humans had stripped him of his military position, but they had not thrown him in prison. Instead, they had given him a choice. He could spend his life in shame, or he could spend it helping the people his empire had displaced. He chose to help. The children are doing well in their new school, reported Soo-Jin Lee, the human administrator who ran the camp. They are learning Earth history along with their own culture. Brix nodded. At first, he had resented human teachers telling Zeridian children about peace and cooperation. Now he understood what they were trying to do. They were teaching his people to be better than their parents had been. What will happen to us, he asked. That depends on you, Soo-Jin replied. The humans are not your rulers. You are not slaves or prisoners. You are students. When you have learned to live without conquest and violence, you will be free to govern yourselves again. And if we never learn? Soo-Jin looked at the Zeridian children playing in the camp's schoolyard. They were laughing and sharing toys with human children who had come to visit. Your children are already learning, she said. Perhaps they will teach you. On Nexus Prime, the Galactic Council met under new rules. The Great Hall had been rebuilt, with a different design. Instead of rows that went up to the ceiling, the seats were arranged in circles. Everyone could see everyone else. No species sat higher than any other. Elder Quarvin still floated in the center, but she was no longer alone. Chancellor Jin-A sat beside her, representing not just humanity but the new principles the galaxy was learning to follow. The Council recognizes the representative from the Vegan Confederacy, Elder Quarvin announced. Ambassador Toxmel stood up. His species had once been among those who laughed at human weakness. Now they were among humanity's closest allies. The Confederacy wishes to formally apologize for our role in removing the ancient protection law, he said. We were fools who thought we understood strength. We have learned that true strength is not the power to destroy, but the wisdom to choose not to. Similar statements came from dozens of species. The galaxy had learned its lesson, but the price had been the destruction of an entire empire. Kira Veltar stood to speak. She had become the Council's leading advocate for the new civilian protection laws. The humans have taught us something important, she said. They have shown us that the most dangerous species are not the ones who conquer the most worlds. The most dangerous species are the ones who have the power to conquer but choose not to use it. She looked around the hall at the representatives of hundreds of different worlds. For 200 years, humans could have destroyed any of us. Instead, they grew food and wrote poetry. They explored the stars and built gardens. They only became warriors when someone threatened their children. The hall was silent as her words sank in. We must all ask ourselves, what would we choose to be if we had that much power? After the council session, Jin'ei walked through the memorial gardens that had been built on Nexus Prime. The gardens contained plants and flowers from every world in the galaxy. At the center was a small greenhouse, built exactly like the one where Jae-won Kim had died. Inside the greenhouse, a young boy was tending to tomato plants. His name was Woojin An, and he was the son of 2 Kepler 442b survivors. His parents had been away from the colony when the Zeridians attacked. They had lost their friends and neighbors, but they had not lost hope. "How are the plants growing?" Jin'ei asked. "Very well," Woojin replied seriously. "I check each one for insects and disease, just like Jae-won Kim used to do." The boy had never met Jae-won, but he had learned about him in school. All human children learned about the boy who died in a greenhouse, tending plants while his world burned around him. "Do you know why we remember Jae-won?" Jin'ei asked. Woojin nodded. "Because he was innocent. Because he was doing something good when something bad happened to him. Because his death reminded us that some things are worth fighting for." "And what are those things?" "Children playing in gardens, families eating dinner together, people growing food and writing poems and taking care of plants." Jin'ei smiled. The boy understood better than most adults what the war had really been about. As the sun set over Nexus Prime, representatives from hundreds of worlds walked through the memorial gardens. They read the names of the dead. They looked at the plants that grew where ashes had once fallen. They remembered the lesson that had cost an empire to learn. In the small greenhouse at the center of the gardens, Woojin An finished checking his tomato plants. Tomorrow he would come back and check them again. He would water them and watch them grow and protect them from insects and disease. It was simple work, peaceful work, the kind of work that humans had chosen to do for 200 years, while they kept their weapons hidden and their fleets ready, the kind of work that the galaxy had finally learned to value. Outside the greenhouse, a memorial plaque caught the last light of the setting sun. The words were simple and clear. "In memory of Jae-won Kim and all who were lost. In hope for all who will learn. Some things are worth fighting for. Some things are worth dying for. But most things are worth living for." The galaxy had learned the oldest rule. Do not provoke the humans. But more importantly, it had learned why the rule existed. Not because humans were monsters who could not be controlled, but because humans were gardeners who would become monsters to protect their gardens. And now, finally, the galaxy understood the difference.